Most people would not have the guts to say what this man did and stand up to the HOA like he did, but oh my goodness, this is such a cool story. It is called Homeowners Association Doesn't Care About My Health, But How Dare My Flat Look Nonconformist by Gingerbread Man 13. Get ready, it's a fun one. This happened 5 years ago. It's a long one, but it's worth the read, or at least I think so. First, a bit about me. For the story's sake, you can call me Alex. I was a 29-year-old male at the time. I'm generally very friendly and accommodating, and I try to avoid confrontation where possible, and always try to do things in a peaceful and patient manner. Now, on to the backstory. I lived in a gated community comprised entirely of multiple blocks of small apartments. Every block of apartments looked exactly the same as the other blocks of apartments around it. They were a few floors high, and I lived on the first floor, and in America, first floor is the ground floor. Where I lived, the ground floor is on the ground, and first floor is the second floor in the States. So I lived one floor above ground floor. The Homeowners Association and estate management were extremely strict about any infringements regarding things that we weren't allowed to do, and would issue fines very quickly if you were in breach of the rules and didn't rectify it. For example, you were allowed to have furniture on your patio, but you weren't allowed to have any decor on your patio. I imagine it was because they wanted uniformity in the appearance of the blocks of flats. Also, no loud noise or music was allowed after 10 p.m. I personally agreed with the no loud noise thing. It was a quiet, peaceful community that frankly was very well managed, which is something I enjoyed about it. I didn't agree so much with that no decor thing. As a photographer and artist, personal expression is important to me, but I figured as long as I kept it tasteful and stylish and, well, mostly out of visible sight, they hopefully wouldn't have an issue with it. I'm a big fan of vintage motorbikes and had a few tasteful, or at least I thought they were tasteful, metal posters with classic bikes like Triumph, Bonnevilles, Indian Scouts, BSAs, Nortons, Ducatis, etc. up on one of the walls of my patio. They were at such an angle that meant they weren't easily visible from the rest of the complex, so I didn't think it would be an issue. Somehow, it was still spotted by the estate manager, but more on this later. I also had a few pot plants on the ledge of my balcony. Now, that's plants in pots, not MJ, and again, we'll get to that later. You need to know about it for the rest of the story. My downstairs neighbor also used to smoke in her back garden. The ground floors had small gardens, and my balcony was directly above her garden. Her smoke would rise up and go through my open bedroom window or the large sliding door on my patio, which was usually open in summer, and then enter my flat. Since I don't smoke, this bothered me. The smell seeped into my furniture and bedding. Even my sleeping pillow smelled of smoke. I politely spoke to her in person about it, and she apologized for the inconvenience, but never stopped doing it. She was actually a very friendly lady. She was never horrible. I just suppose she was nice enough to be friendly, but not nice enough to stop doing it. So I decided to take it a step further, and I emailed the manager of the gated community to ask if there was something that could be done. The following is the email transaction between myself and the manager, who I'll call Nicole. Good day. I stay in Unit 117 on the first floor, and my downstairs neighbor who lives on the ground floor, although being a very friendly old lady, has a nasty habit of smoking in her patio. My issue is that in the summer with the heat, I leave my bedroom window and sliding door open to keep my flat cool, and the fumes from her cigarettes are constantly rising up and entering my apartment. I am not a smoker, so this bothers me. My flat smells as if a smoker lives there. Now my question is there any rule or law that says that she can't smoke in her patio due to her smoke entering my flat? She knows her smoke bothers me and has apologized to me for it, but hasn't done anything about it. If she were to only smoke inside her flat or outside her front door, I'm sure the smoke wouldn't come into my flat nearly as much, since I never have my front door open. Thanks in advance. Regards, Alex. So she responded with, "Good morning, Alex. This is a very contentious issue, as this is her home and there is no law at the moment stating that you cannot smoke in your home. Regards, Nicole." Now, I wasn't happy with that response, but I figured there was nothing more I could do about it, and I didn't want to bother making a big issue out of it, so I just forgot about it, and I moved on until about a year later, when the estate management picked up on 2 infringements by me. At this point, Nicole had resigned, and Stuart had replaced her. This is the email I got from Stuart. Good day. I trust that you are well. Please could you remove the pots from the wall as per the attached photo, as this is dangerous should they be knocked off and fall onto someone downstairs and in breach of the conduct rules. Furthermore, no items can be attached to the walls in the patio, and you are requested to remove the pictures as per the photo, as this is aesthetically displeasing. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Stuart, Estate Manager. After that email, I was now a bit upset, and I was determined to get my way in terms of my smoking downstairs neighbor. Cue my malicious compliance. Good day, Stuart. Hey, I'm very well. Thanks for asking. Absolutely, I will take the pictures down. Not a problem. We wouldn't want someone's vision to be irreparably damaged from the unsightly trauma that is my vintage bike picture collection. Though I must comment that I appreciate the very polite way my decor is described as aesthetically displeasing, as opposed to what that actually means. Dang, that's ugly. It's probably more of a colloquial translation. My feelings might have been hurt otherwise. I'm very relieved I didn't go into the profession of interior decorating, which a few people I know have said I should have done, since the sudden realization that my taste in style isn't what I once thought it was. It could have been a disaster career-wise. Alternatively, what if I were to replace the photos of the bikes with a nice family portrait of my parents? Granted, they aren't supermodels, but they're attractive to me, though I may be biased in that opinion since I care for them. So I'm hoping they're not too ugly. Oops, I mean aesthetically displeasing. If that fails, maybe a reproduction of the Mona Lisa would be sufficient to meet your high standards. Tourists travel across the globe and wait in line for hours just to see it for a few minutes. Would that be allowed? I won't even charge fellow tenants for looking at it when they're walking past my balcony. Obviously, I'm being a little ridiculous, and I don't mean to give you a hard time. You're just doing your job and enforcing some of the ridiculous rules that management come up with, like the communist-level restriction on personal expression and the freedom of choice to decorate and style our own property in a manner that we like. God forbid we show some individuality. Now that I think about it, the endless rows of identical-looking Soviet-era housing structures do have a nice seizure-inducing repetitive nature about them. While we're on the subject of decor, how is it that that plastic patio furniture is still allowed? Yes, it is patio furniture, which complex rules say are allowed on patios, but dang, that is painful to look at. You know what I mean, right? That cheap white plastic stuff one buys at the furniture section at those large bulk buying stores. I find it very aesthetically displeasing. Screw it. It's ugly. I don't like looking at it. It comes across as tacky. Can't they be scrapped as well? I'm going off topic again. The whole point of me bringing all this up is that a few months ago, I emailed asking about a complaint that I had. The complaint was that the lady who lives directly downstairs from me regularly smokes in her garden. And me, being the lover of oxygen that I am, I keep my windows and my patio door open for fresh air. And her smoke is constantly wafting into my apartment. Me being a non-smoker, I get quite annoyed. I asked if anything could be done about this, and I was told, it's her property and her patio. She can smoke on it if she wants to. I know that health legislation stipulates that smoking within a certain distance from a designated non-smoking area is illegal. If it's good enough for public spaces, shouldn't I have that same right in my own house? Granted, I don't have designated non-smoking area signs in my flat, but I'm the only one who lives there, so I already know there's no smoking allowed. I made the rule. It would be silly to put them up inside. Should I put them up outside on my patio instead so that others can see? Maybe they don't know that I don't like cigarette smoke. Actually, wait, I already know the answer to that. They're aesthetically displeasing. Forget that I mentioned it. So, to recap, what really gripes me is that when my neighbor smokes so close to my flat that I can practically smell what brand of cigarette she smokes, I'm told I can't do anything about it, even though it might affect my health, because it's her property and she can do what she likes on it. By that logic, she could host orgies on her lawn and I couldn't do anything about it so long as she kept the volume down after 10 p.m. but I can't put up pictures on my patio because some people might not like the way they look, even though it is also my property and it would be nice if I could do with it as I wanted, provided it wasn't an eyesore. Since I take a lot of pride in my flat, I wouldn't call it an eyesore as I maintain it quite well, or at least I think so. If only a person's lungs and health were as important as other people's inability to mind their own business. So, what I really want to know is there any way that my neighbor could possibly just smoke inside her flat, or at least outside the front of her flat if she insists on smoking outside where the smoke won't come into my place as easily? I would accept that too. I'm not a completely unreasonable guy. I find her smoke nasally displeasing. I normally wouldn't make such a big deal about it, but I'm starting to feel that what I'm subjected to versus what others have to be subjected to, it's a bit unfair. Sorry to put all this on you, Stuart. I understand it's totally not your fault. I'll still take the pictures and the pot plants down immediately. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Alex, Unit 117. I sent that reply after 6 p.m. and I did not expect him to respond until the next morning. But half an hour later, I got a reply. My email, it must have made an impact. Hi Alex, thank you for your email. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I do understand your frustration and unfortunately, this is the reality of staying in such built-up complexes. I will address the issue of the smoking with your neighbor and will revert to you. Thank you for your assistance and understanding. Kind regards, Stuart. To me, well, that sounded positive, so Stuart deserved a pat on the back. I sent a short reply. Hey, thanks Stuart, much appreciated. You're a top-notch guy. By now, it was after 8 p.m. and I'm sure someone with a 9-to-5 desk job like Stuart should have been at home and clocked out, but he was still replying to me. Hi Alex, I have confirmed that smoking is only allowed inside the unit, or at least 5 meters from a public place, such as your balcony. I will confirm the neighbor's unit number in the morning, unless you can advise offhand, and will address her on the smoking issue. Kind regards, Stuart. I was over the moon. I ran downstairs to see what her unit number was and ran back upstairs to reply. Stuart, you've gone from being a top-notch guy to being a legend. Thanks so much. Her unit is 107. I was worried the outcome wouldn't be great and would have to accidentally bump into my pots while taking my pictures down while she was conveniently smoking in just the right position. It would be a tragic accident, of course. I'm sorry, some smoke got into my lungs. Though that would be a lot of effort since I've already taken the plants and pictures down and I would have to put them all up again to make the story sound believable to the police because they would no doubt interrogate me on a suspected murder with a pot plant. And that's frankly too much effort. Luckily, I don't have to resort to that. Thanks again, Stuart. Your hard work has kept me out of prison. It's late. You can email her in the morning. Go home and have a beer. You've earned it. P.S. In all seriousness, though, I'm totally kidding about the pot plant thing, and if the lady downstairs were to peg it in the near future, it would be completely coincidental and nothing to do with me, and I'd appreciate it if you forgot you ever spoke to me. This would be terrible evidence against me in court. I mean, I dislike smokers, but I wouldn't kill them. I'm not crazy. Regards, Alex. Sadly, that was the last I would hear from Stuart. Our correspondence stopped after that. I felt we had developed a bond, and it ended as quickly as it has begun. I only lived in that estate for another 2 years and had no more issues with the downstairs neighbor or her cigarette smoke. I now live in the suburbs in a lovely house with my wife and have no downstairs neighbors to complain about and no stewards to tell me what I can and can't do. I will treasure our time together. I hope wherever he is, he has our email thread printed out and pinned on his office board above his desk and thinks of me fondly whenever he looks at it. My HOA is basically extorting homeowners for money, posted by Potential Dare 5076. I live in a neighborhood in Florida where the HOA is out of control, like many other HOAs. They've been sued several times, and the largest and more recent one was dismissed with prejudice, I believe. We have not had a real election since long before we moved in, as we have now learned. Apparently, from my understanding, last year at the election, we did not have enough voters, so they kept themselves on the board, and at this time the board passed a policy, key word here, that says they can charge homeowners a % of any projects over a certain dollar amount to pay for a general contractor they appoint to come look at your project to determine if it matches what was submitted to the HOA for approval. This person would be receiving a minimum of $1,500 to come look at your project twice to check a box, essentially. Turning in my application was the first time that I had heard of this policy. I vaguely remember there being something last year about a $375 fee, but I cannot find it anywhere. Further, on the project approval form, it says if you do not abide by the items on the approval form, you could pay a $1,000 fine. Note that notification about this % is not included on the ARB policy and approval form that you turn in. I asked why I couldn't just pay the fine because it was cheaper than the % for the contractor, and we were threatened with a lawsuit. They told us that we had to pay the general contractor fee because otherwise they would sue us and then make us tear down our project if we went forward, and then told us about other situations where they are suing other homeowners for this now. I was obviously very upset by this being sprung upon us. I never, as a homeowner, voted on this, so I'm not sure how they can continue to pass these ridiculous policies. Note the project approval form has not been updated since 2020, and the architectural review bylaws have not been updated since 2018. I checked with my county's comptroller and no changes have been filed. So basically, they are creating policies so they do not have to update the CC&Rs. The files on our neighbor network and HOA website do not have any of this anywhere posted that I can see. The latest ARB is 2021. I asked for them to provide me direct links, and they simply said that I can find them under the meeting minutes, but they're not anywhere in the documents for policies and so on. Simply, is this enforceable? We have to pay a contractor that they appoint, which there is no guarantee that there is no affiliation with someone on the board, an example, COI, and there is no way around this contractor fee. There is nowhere that this information is posted that I can find. The county has not been updated of this change in the policy, bylaw, and CC&R, and we were threatened with a lawsuit if we did not agree to pay this fee. The project is expensive enough as it is. Why do they think they can just look at how much we plan to spend and then tell us that a contractor is worth a % of that cost? The ARB approval is also not by any homeowners, but rather people who work for the property management company. I'm just not sure how any of this is legal. For the fines, it's $100 a day for 10 days, up to $1,000. On the form, it outlines what they can fine you for, like construction outside of approved hours, doing multiple additions and changes not on the form, like adding in a pool but then tearing down trees and putting in new ones. For the %, as I have not seen it, I asked where the numbers came from and how this fee was assessed. They have a percentage for categorized projects, like solar panel installation would be a 1% fee, but home addition would be a 3% fee. I wish I knew more, and I also wish I knew about this % before I spent weeks preparing for my project, getting quotes, taking days off to meet with contractors, and so on. Unfortunately, with the cost of our project, adding 3% makes it unfeasible. The homeowners named on the lawsuit essentially gave up. It went on for several years. The HOA threatened all homeowners with an, if you back these people and they win, we will fine all of you $20,000 to pay them, since their liability was only $1 million. The HOA also sent out defaming monthly newsletters, printed and mailed, to the entire community about the people on the lawsuit. I think it just honestly became too much for them. Every election there are not enough voters. However, this most recent election, it was deliberately made unclear what made your vote count. So many people stepped up to run. They told us that participation on Zoom would count for quorum, but then did not let anyone in from the waiting room. In general, frequently during Zoom meetings, they would mute homeowners who spoke up, but they do not host any monthly meetings anymore, and more specifically, no meetings are in person at all, which is against the bylaws. Basically, homeowners are no longer given the opportunity to speak up and out about the board, and it makes policies that they can just do whatever they want. They told us that many homeowners are upset about this percentage because they didn't know about it. It isn't posted anywhere, we haven't been formally notified of this policy, and we aren't the only ones, and they only enforce it after you give them the project and they see the dollar amount, and then they say, oh, okay, you owe us $3,600. You're wondering if this is legal or not. What if you talk to an HOA specific lawyer, somebody that knows the ins and outs of this stuff, and really figure out what you can do from here to take him down if you need to? Neighbor is trying to use the county and police to enforce their HOA. I recently purchased a vacant piece of 20 acres in a rural county. A 5-acre subdivision with HOA restrictive covenants borders my property. I am not in the HOA. The access for my property is through a deeded public county road that goes through the HOA neighborhood. As soon as I bought my property, I went out to take the sign down. The president of the HOA came down to ask me what I was doing there, and what my plans are for the property. I was polite and friendly. He told me about their HOA and told me that I was required to submit any plans I had for the property to him before I could build or do anything. I politely let him know that I was not in the HOA but had intentions of being neighborly. Over the course of 6 months, he would call me any time we visited the property, and 2 days later, we would get a letter from the county about a nuisance complaint. I eventually asked him to stop calling me and let him know my private property was my private business and that I would not be calling him every time I visited or used my land. The complaints to the county escalated. Every time I went to my property, I could be sure there would be a complaint that I was committing some infraction that I was not. I met with the county zoning and building enforcement officers. I explained to them what was happening. I showed them that I was not committing the violations I was being accused of, and I expressed my frustration with having to explain myself and deal with these complaints every time I used my property. They agreed and assured me that I was within compliance and not to worry. The HOA has escalated again. First off, calling and emailing every person with a county email address to deliver false complaints. Contacting every state and county organization from air quality control to Division of Wildlife to the tax assessor, trying to find any and all regulations that I may or may not be in violation of. And then they were blocking the road and my access to my property physically with their vehicles and firearms. I had to wait on my property until the police arrived to remove them before I could leave. They were video surveilling me, my property, and my visitors any time that we visited the property, and they've gone to 2 county commission meetings now and blatantly lied and slandered me to the county commission during public comment. They've tried to start the process to vacate the road to my property. Throughout the process, I have communicated with the county and maintained a good relationship and ensured that I was in compliance. One of the county commissioners told me, "This is not about a specific violation, this is about the HOA attempting to exercise control over your property that they do not have and reaching for any straw that they can find when one attempt is unfruitful." I'm not sure what to do or how to make it stop. I generally just ignore them, but on the advice of police, I serve the neighbors with notice of trespass and a letter to cease and desist the ongoing stalking and harassment. This was to no avail. At this point, I feel like there has been blatant defamation, false light, and intentional affliction of emotional distress, but I don't know that I've been damaged other than my time and effort to deal with their frivolous complaints. What options do I have to make it stop? Do you agree? Good Lord, this definitely needs to be handled by a competent attorney or attorneys in your jurisdiction, like 2 months ago. There's so much to untangle here, and there are likely complaints to bodies that you're unaware of. At the very least, keep a detailed record of every interaction that you've had with them in some kind of journal and logbook that details the police being called out. Certainly get a report or case number from the officers, any text messages, voicemails, or emails, and so on before calling attorneys in your area. If you're concerned about the HOA having influence over your local law offices, if you live in a small town, then look up one in your state's capital. I mean, if they're blocking you from the property with the guns and the firearms and vehicles, and it's all done illegally and they're using cops against you, you gotta lawyer up. What would you do? Entitled HOA Karen Storytime in, D-Bag tries to enforce his own community rules while ignoring the already established ones, posted by Higure 2. I live in a private community in Mexico with around 50 houses, and we have something similar to an American HOA, but this one is not legal and it doesn't impose fines. It collects monthly fees to pay gardeners and security. It also proposes community rules which are approved by the majority of the residents and are followed by almost all of them. Second, I have a duplex house. I live in the lower floor and I rent the upper one. 2 years ago, I had a tenant who got into a fight with all the neighbors about the constant parties she threw. They tried to call the police several times, but she never did anything illegal, never exceeded the maximum number of occupants under COVID restrictions, and never exceeded the noise allowed, and also followed the HOA rules by ending parties or leaving with her guest by around 2300 hours. The HOA was ticked, and the president, which I'll call D-Bag, was so angry, he decided to completely ignore all the rules and laws, skip the process to change the HOA rules, and just decided to dispose the tenant of her security service, which is opening and closing the entrance to the private community for her and her visits, until she stopped the parties, which she did since she didn't want to sue the HOA for only 1 month left in her contract. After this, I hated the D-Bag Karen and he hated me so badly because of some comments that I said to him in our last conversations, like, "It seems sad that an engineer like me knows the law better than you who's a lawyer," or "Such a shame my tenant didn't sue you, you almost had a case to defend." Last year, I adopted a puppy, which I'll call Cookie for the story, since one of the 3 parks in our community is in front of my house crossing the street that I train Cookie to go park, go pee, and go home. We usually do that 3 times a day and play catch 10 to 20 minutes each time. I have to mention, she is a very muscular 60-pound dog, mixed pit bull with something, but she's never bitten or acted aggressive in her life. 3 months ago, a lady I'll call Karen was walking by with her 2 children, about 5 to 7 years old, and probably was thinking about going to the park where I was walking towards with Cookie, and she started screaming about why I had a dog without a leash. Since Cookie didn't know them and they weren't in the park, she just ignored them and kept walking. But, oh boy, Karen was mad. She stayed in the entrance of the park in front of her children, waiting for me to put a leash on Cookie, which I ignored. And then she said that it was just a rule here, and I said, "Oh good, so what?" And then D-Bag appears, and it seems he is Karen's husband, makes sense now, and started saying it was a rule that all dogs must have a leash at all times. I just ignored him, saying things like, "Oh good, cool, whatever, don't care." But after they started to scream, I decided not to play catch with Cookie and told her to go home. After that, D-Bag said, "It would be a shame if a car hit your dog because it wasn't on a leash," which I answered saying, "There's a speed limit here, and I don't think anyone would hit my dog on purpose other than you." And then I followed Cookie home. Finally, for the climax. Last week, I was parking with Cookie and 2 other dogs in the car that I was planning to take that weekend. They were in the back seat in front of the park at the other side of the street where my house is. They were just taking a bath in the vet. Then I opened the door and Cookie ran to the park, both excited to play with the other 2 dogs and because she badly needed to go pee and didn't need to wait for me, since she was already on the other side of the street. And then I start hearing Karen shouts, the leash, put a leash on it." Then I see it's Karen and her 2 sons in the park again. I didn't see them before, and since the sprinklers were on in half of the park, I didn't think there would be people there. I just wasn't going to play and just let them pee and go home. So I grabbed the other 2 dogs and walked to the entrance of the park. And of course, since Karen and their children were in the park already, Cookie was upside down waiting for a belly rub. So we meet them next to the Karen who was in front of her children, like protecting them from a wild coyote, and then I said, "Cookie, go pee." And Cookie stands and goes to pee on the other side of the park, closer to the sprinklers. I was thinking I was lucky. It was only one of 2 idiots, but I guess I wasn't that lucky because 5 seconds later, D-Bag stands 2 feet in front of my face, and this exchange started. "How many times have I told you? You can't have a dog without a leash here." So I reply back, "So far, 2 times. "There have been plenty of times." It's not like that I'm keeping count. All this was happening with 2 kids with confused faces, a mad red-faced Karen and Cookie peeing in the background. I was very ticked now, and the exchange continued. "It is in the rules. Just follow them," D-Bag says. I reply, Why would I follow any rules you established when you don't even follow them yourself? If you don't like seeing my dog without a leash, and I lost myself here, there are 2 other parks closer to your house, so screw off." Then I grabbed Cookie by her collar because she wasn't going home without using the bathroom, but didn't feel like waiting for it, and I walked with all 3 dogs to my house, saying to Cookie in a loud voice, "It seems they only come to this park just to annoy us, Cookie. Let's see how long it takes for their next appearance." We never had a rule about leashes in our community, and we haven't updated the rules yet since we haven't had any HOA meetings for it, so if it's in the rules now, it wasn't approved by the community. Housing Association wants me to pay my late auntie's debt? No, pay me the money I overpaid instead. Posted by Joshi. Before I lived in my current place, I was living with my auntie. She was the main tenant who sorted the bills, and I would pay her a lump sum each month as board payments. In early 2021, she passed away unexpectedly. Naturally, I didn't want to continue living in this place. Bad memories and bearing the responsibility for an entire place alone wasn't feasible for me financially at the time. After speaking with the Housing Association, I was informed the only way to end the tenancy would be by getting the tenancy agreement moved over into my name before terminating the tenancy when I was ready to move out. What I didn't know at this point was that my auntie was in arrears on the rent payment. When it came to the point of leaving the tenancy, I had money in savings and just settled up the rent entirely by paying about £500 of my auntie's arrears on top of the rent that I personally owed from living there alone. I then stayed at the place for a few more weeks before closing the tenancy. In hindsight, I probably should have queried the payment, but at that point, I just wanted rid of the place. After moving into my new place, I was getting pestered by the Housing Association, who said I still owed £300 on the previous house. There was a lot of back and forth before I then asked for a copy of the rent statement. It was around this time that I was speaking to people about this money I supposedly owed. I was informed that I probably shouldn't be liable for my auntie's debt, as I didn't receive the estate and was not the next of kin. However, there was an argument to be made that I was liable for the debt, as technically my name was on the agreement and I became the main tenant. With this information in mind, I looked at the rent statement, worked out how much money I'd owed from the first week after my auntie had passed, and deducted it from my total rent payments made after that point. And it turned out I had paid £200 extra, assuming I wasn't liable for the debt. I presented all my working out in a thorough email and I sent it over. I didn't hear anything back from them after that, conveniently, and assumed it was all over. I decided to not pursue this as I was sick of being pestered by them, and I wasn't 100% sure if I was or wasn't liable for this money. Fast forward nearly 2 years, I received a letter last month, just before Christmas, stating that I still owed this £300 and it would be sent to debt collectors if nothing was done. At this point, I was ticked off. I spoke to someone who was able to tell me for sure that I am not liable for the debt in this particular situation. So I sent a firmly written email detailing how I don't owe this money, but in fact, they owed me, provided all the evidence, and threatened small claims if the situation wasn't rectified soon. It took weeks of me pestering them via phone calls and emails for me to be able to get in contact with a lovely woman who apologized on behalf of the company on how I was treated. She then got the ball rolling, and eventually my £200 refund cleared the other day. This was a particularly satisfying end, because if they would have just left it, I wouldn't have chased it up, and they would be £200 better off. What a shame. I was fired for inadvertently stumbling on my boss's malfeasance. I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. Posted by Call Me Swellington. This was in the last throes of the analog mid-90s. Fax machines, FedEx, and dial-up computing and voicemail were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major branded consumer product. I covered the grocery class of trade in 11 western states. My division worked out of Chicago, and I had a home office on the West Coast. I had made my reputation by typically making my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets, and more often than not, I would usually make my sales number. Nothing too fancy, I just figured where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called Market Development Funds, MDF, or as we called it, Making Days Fun. In the time before such things were deemed illegal, it was money that we could literally use for almost anything you could imagine. Wining and dining, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, taking them on market research trips. I once took 6 honchos for a weekend of fishing in Mexico. As long as you had the receipts and your boss knew, except in cases where they specifically asked not to know, we were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was old school Mad Men style slush funds, all tax deductible. Typically, the MDF money was 2% of your total annual gross sales and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it wouldn't roll over. I always had some left over, and as a team player, I would let my boss, Sasquatch, know so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly FedEx pack from the company started including sign-offs for payments to a supplier that I've never heard of before. What was weird is that they were for a demo company that wasn't one of my regional suppliers. If you've ever been offered a sample or a coupon in a grocery store, that was a demo company. I called the broker and agent in that market, and I learned that they had never used the company or even heard of them. I finally figured out that they were from Sasquatch and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were, and he said that they should be assigned to my MDF and not to worry about them. This was a little unusual because the demos would normally be taken out of other monies or come down from marketing. Whatever, I signed off on them. Hung out to dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told that I was being transferred to a market that I'd never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant, and we had just started an extensive remodel in our newly purchased house. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the southeast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The truth comes to light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's past work associates who he had managed to get hired in my spot, and that the region was tanking badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think in my naivety that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, which was much harder before the internet, I learned that the demo company billing the MDF was based in my ex-boss's previous city and was just a P.O. box, a telephone, and a DBA registered by the new person in my job, and I later found out that it was his girlfriend and mistress. I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head, but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it's a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged. But this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down, whatever the time it took, whatever the cost in lives or money. I was going to get this mofo. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled ex-employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach the guy as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resume, but as a retained corporate headhunter. Someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm, and I knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international telexes, phony letterhead, faked English accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Sasquatch was obsessed with expensive watches and golf. He played regularly and watched pro golf both on TV and live. He would incessantly chatter on about both subjects. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached for an executive position with a major Swiss watch company for a position tied to pro golf and other swanky sports for sponsorships, and included a shopping list of benefits and prerequisites. The job would require hobnobbing with major sports organizers, flying around the world, first class, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup. In the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Switzerland for the final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old jobs division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Sasquatch was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. The headhunting firm said that they could move the appointment up a few days so that he would be able to attend the meeting, but that he would need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make his own hotel reservations. Save your receipts and the watch company will reimburse you, he was told. Sasquatch showed up to his swanky hotel suite using his own credit card for the high-dollar room and promptly received a note from the watch company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday because of a major corporate crisis. Sasquatch called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. It was agreed that he would call in sick and that whatever happened with the old job, he was heading to much greener fairways. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday, you'll be in your dream job. The Sting. While Sasquatch was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Sasquatch's work ethic and dates of employment. You'd be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, didn't tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that he was in Europe finalizing his new job and that he'd already given the company notice. My bad. The bloody aftermath and how the revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from old coworkers and other people in the trade who did not know I was the revenge ninja. When Monday came and went, Sasquatch must have been apoplectic. This is assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple faxes. Sasquatch hung around the hotel for a day or two and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the watch company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve his car and other company property. I heard his wife left him sometime later and his mistress was fired for theft. I figure he spent at least $10,000 on travel and hotel. Epilogue. I wish that I could say that I tipped my hand and told Sasquatch that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose and in theory may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral lodestar, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. And that was plenty. You fired your 5-person team and blamed it on IT? So I made your job redundant, posted by the Lightning Count 1. So at my job there was a small team of 6. 5 workers and a VP who literally only was a VP for those 5 people. Go figure. Their job in its entirety was to monitor all sources of contact with support teams, evaluate the contact, and report negative customer satisfaction ratings to the relevant supervisors and the CIO. In layman's terms, they collected all data regarding bad calls or chats or tickets with all support teams and sent the information to the managerial staff for each department. They did not listen to phone calls. They did not read chat logs. They simply picked the negatives and sent them out to everyone. For those of you scratching your head thinking, a script can do that. Well, a script was made to do that. By me after the last major fiasco involving the support team reporting. There was an EVP who left long ago who hated me, who did not like the thought of me handling this issue all on my own, so she hired 6 people. Well, over the last year, my company has been closing loopholes. No personal equipment, no outdated Windows versions, no working outside secured systems. This created a paradigm shift for this small team. They continuously contacted IT to help them get in compliance, then get them up and running on the new systems. Of course, since these were stubborn, irrational workers, These ladies refused to follow compliance fully and kept trying to figure out ways to game the system. Those in the know will understand that this means that they contact IT with problems that do not exist. They will contact us wanting things to work in unsecure ways and demand that we fix the problem. This created a sort of battle of the departments in the company where anytime we would request something, they would fight for it for budgetary reasons. Anytime they would request something, we did nothing. In essence, we employed the Space Wolves strategy. This came to a head at the last department head meeting. My VP asked me to go in his stead, and he would be on Zoom listening in case he needed to approve or deny something. Different departments do their thing, go about their room detailing changes in terms, additions and subtractions to the budgets, and finally just rounding out this, mostly useless meeting with praise to the company. Then, it's her turn. Karen, we shall call her. Karen was sitting there with this fake somber expression and looking absolutely dejected as she started off her report detailing the loss of her entire department. The way she described it was like reading an obituary. The conversation following is mostly accurate. Karen said, "So, in essence, the main reason why I was forced to let them go was because we could not justify their salary requirements any longer." EVP of Marketing says, "Why is that?" "See, the amount of IT troubles the department has been having recently has forced them to slow down their work. Over the last 4 months, a total of 48 IT troubleshooting contacts have come from my team to IT. Each time IT refused to help and forced them to use their methods." My boss on Zoom had an incredulous look on his face, and I was just giving her a cockeyed expression of disbelief. At this moment, I am doing the job of the entire 6-person staff by myself, as feelers are being put out there for new hires. Unfortunately, the rampant IT issues we are having forces me to hold off on any new employees until these are fixed." Teams message pops up. Didn't you make a script for exactly her job?" Light bulb moment, and I had to force myself not to smile wide. I sent off a message to my boss. "I got this. I so got this." And I linked him to the script. He looked it over, and I could see the gears turning as he realized the script for what it was. So, it's a script that does her job. She still made the darning accusations for the IT group. He was more concerned about what she said. I was more concerned about removing a thorn in my side. I have the answer for that, but it won't be needed. Karen finished her diatribe, and all eyes looked at me. So I would like to start off with my proposal that I was going to save for the end. However, Karen has seen fit to necessitate its urgency more. I completely avoided the issue Karen brought up and started right off the bat. I was going to suggest augmenting her team's function with the script that was created by the IT team and approved by the CISO a year ago. For some reason, there was pressure to block the script and implement Karen's team instead, which Karen has just informed us has been let go from our company. Karen got this strange look like she was not exactly sure what was happening. "So, what does the script do?" the CIO said. I say, it parses the CSAT logs, grabs all the negative or neutral CSATs, and emails the relevant supervisor or manager with the data. Ever have those moments when everyone in the room knows that you just suggested something kind of evil, yet they also kind of want this to happen? That was the faces of half of the people there. The other half did not care, and one was really scared. I said, "I'll go ahead and run it now." 2 minutes go by and a lot of Outlook pings start popping off in the conference room. "You should all be getting email notifications with your CSAT numbers." I waited 10 seconds before adding in, "Oh yeah, this script actually significantly expands on the functions provided by Karen's team. It also tells you your percentages for positive versus negative ratings, average time spent on an issue, if there were any major outages. It precludes all CSATs related to the outages, as those are almost universally negative, and the support teams involved have no resolution during outages, as it's vendor responsibility." CIO says, "What else were you going to discuss in the meeting before Karen's notes prompted this response?" I say, "Oh, it's mostly irrelevant now. Several contacts that come into IT are about non-issues. These are people wanting to circumvent the security policies so they can go back to the easier way of doing things. However, the vast majority of these contacts have come from Karen's team. Since they are no longer employees of our company, it is irrelevant data. 3 days later, her department is shuttered. She tried to get on under other departments. However, over the last year, she has used her position to bring herself up by bringing others down. So, everyone hated her and no one wanted her. She was let go today with a significantly reduced severance package. HOA raising monthly fees by almost 20% due to a legal battle with 2 residents who own non-certified pit bulls. Can anything be done to fight this? So the HOA sent out an email recently stating that they would be increasing the monthly amount by 20% after a long and costly legal battle with 2 sets of residents who did not disclose they were keeping pit bulls. The 2 sets of residents claimed emotional support animal, or ESA status, and had their lawyers fight it. The reasoning for the increase in cost is because the HOA stated that their liability insurance went from $2,500 to $10,000 a month, which is a 4x increase, and needed to comp that by raising the monthly rates of each tenant. No other insurance company would cover with the presence of pit bulls. They stated that this process had been going on for 6 months. They held our annual meeting last month, which was virtual because they got torn apart for the last in-person one, and nothing was mentioned of this ongoing issue. They purposely chose to release this information and the increase in cost after the annual meeting had been done to prevent the tenants from banding together. It's just incredibly frustrating that because of 2 sets of residents, the entire complex has to deal with such a high increase in HOA fees. Can anything be done? The HOA sucks in general. Upkeep for the property, snow removal, and so on are terrible compared to our surrounding complexes. Here's the letter that they sent out to all the tenants for more information. Please read through the entirety of this letter. It contains important information about your HOA insurance and immediate dues increase. Last September, the HOA learned that 2 different units here at HOA Place had unapproved pit bulls. Per our bylaws, all pets need to be approved in writing by the HOA board. This is for pet owner protection, as well as the protection of the residents of this community. It ensures responsible pet ownership, up-to-date pet vaccination records, and compliance with our HOA insurance, which will not cover our association if there are aggressive dog breeds living here. Our HOA insurer told us our policy would not be renewed April 1st, 2023 if the 2 pit bulls remained on our site. Per our bylaws, no owner shall do anything that will cause our association to lose its HOA insurance. Because both owners refused to remove their dogs, we were forced to seek legal action on behalf of the association to avoid losing its insurance. Both owners sought protection under the Fair Housing Act by claiming their pit bulls were emotional support animals and demanded that the association find new insurance for our association that would include pit bull coverage. When the board informed one of the pit bull owners that the pit bulls were prohibited, she sought ESA asylum after the fact. The other owner is a renter. Even when informed that their dogs would cost the HOA their insurance, these 2 owners refused to permanently remove their dogs. In spite of this, the HOA board tried to accommodate their request, per the Fair Housing Act, that we secure a different insurer for our association. Both the board and our insurance carrier contacted dozens of insurers, most of whom refused to even consider insuring an association with pit bulls. The few quotes we received that would cover an HOA with pit bulls were financially unmanageable. The HOA board did not feel that asking this of our association was a fair accommodation, and we were forced to seek legal action against the 2 pit bull owners. For the last half of a year, we have been working with an attorney on behalf of the association. This has been a time-consuming, stressful 6 months for the board, and we could not discuss this with everyone without compromising our legal case. As of April 1st, 2023, our HOA insurance was not renewed. This was 100% due to the continued presence of the pit bulls on the property. While one of the pit bull owners agreed to temporarily remove her dog, she claims that she did so on March 31st, 2023. This was too little too late, and our insurer would not renew our policy when it was literally within hours of expiring. The insurance we had a competitive premium, excellent coverage, and an almost impossible to find flat rate deductible of $2,500. This is no more. We were able to secure new coverage, but at an increased premium. Our deductibles will be 4 times higher at $10,000. Our premiums will increase approximately $8,500 a year. As a direct result, HOA dues will increase effective June 1st, 2023 by $20 a month to $170 a month. The $20 monthly increase is solely to pay for the increase in HOA insurance premiums and deductibles resulting from the presence of the pit bulls. Another fallout is that we will need to postpone some of the capital improvements that we had contracted for this spring, including replacing the wood retaining wall at the corner of street with stone due to the unexpected legal expenditures as described above. This person says to read the CC&Rs and figure out what exactly they can do budget-wise, but I mean honestly, if you have any questions like this, a lawyer should be able to comb through that letter and figure out what to do. Is it fair to punish all the residents because of the actions of 2 with the pit bulls? Let me know what you do. Now you get to be HOA president. 2-parent malicious compliance, posted by I Want a Secret Garden. Long but worth it. About 25 years ago, my parents built their dream house. Although the house is now in the middle of a large metroplex, when they built it, it was in the fringes of countryside with rapid development over 2 decades. When they bought the lot, they were the first to purchase from the developer. The developer sold to 3 original neighbors, my parents and 2 others, all at the end of the cul-de-sac in a row. The other streets in this plat also became a large subdivision with a fancy name that would come to bear a lot of prestige. But that meant being part of an HOA. They didn't want that. The developer wouldn't sell them the land without an HOA. If you aren't a part of the community, you'll need to form your own HOA and get it approved. So my dad, with a beatific grin, said he would be the HOA president of our single suburban street. He and the 2 neighbors drafted the bylaws of their own HOA in strict accordance with the planned neighborhood. But they added a special provision that the president of the HOA could name a successor instead of having the street vote on one. Absent a majority rejection, the successor would be the president, essentially trying to avoid terms in campaigning while still offering folks a way to dispute the HOA president, important for later. So, in the winter of 1994, my father very seriously took the thick black CD binder full of laminated and hole-punched instructions and the pages on how to be a good HOA president and put that binder in the very back of a cabinet and forgot about it for the next 16 years. The homeowners of our street were not asked to pay an annual fee, and the HOA didn't police number of cars, color front doors, or any other ridiculous standards HOAs enforce. As it was a quiet cul-de-sac, no one did anything more egregious than the occasional reckless teenager. Then, a new family built the house across from us. It consisted of 2 children, a husband, and a stay-at-home mom we'll call Gladys, Kravitz for the Bewitched fans. Now Gladys was a real busybody. She would stand at the front windows of her house to watch and patrol which cars were using the cul-de-sac to turn around, when houses down the street held events and parties, and were using the front of her house to park for literally a night, and sending noise complaints to the police about barking dogs, her other neighbors' kids, there were 6 in a blended family, the other neighbors' cars, they were collectors not even repairing cars, and other ridiculously petty things. She didn't have a job, so safety patrol became her whole identity. She would always hurry over to gossip whenever my mom was taking out the trash cans to the curb. Sadly, my dad contracted a neuromuscular disease in 2005. It got bad quickly, and he was confined to a wheelchair. I learned to drive for my hardship license in a handicap van, and we had more than the usual number of cars due to the round-the-clock caregivers in the later years. Gladys decided it was time to offer help to my poor mother, who was slaving absurd hours just to keep creditors at bay. Gladys very sweetly approached, expressed her sympathies for our struggles, pointed out the number of cars in our driveway, and generously, so generously, offered to take over the president of the HOA duties if my father would name her successor. After being hounded the 6th or 7th time, and Gladys hinting that if my mom was struggling so much, maybe she could send my dad to hospice and move houses to something more suited. In fact, Gladys's best friend was looking for a house and would love to live across the street and buy our house. My mom frickin' snapped. She basically told Gladys to stop asking and that her husband was dying, and it was incredibly insensitive and rude to offer to kick us out of our neighborhood and to take over just because she wanted clout to annoy the neighbors about letting kids play basketball after 6 p.m. Gladys responded nastily that my dad would have to name a successor because when he died, soon, the HOA presidency would revert back for election. Okay then, Gladys, you're absolutely right. My dad should name someone the HOA president as his successor after his 16-year reign. Malicious compliance activated. After my dad died, my mom found out that she was named as the next HOA president in my dad's will. Dad never said anything about it while he was alive, but his rumor was always understated. Gladys was apoplectic. She tried to overturn the successor claim and run against my mom, but nobody else on the street contested the choice. No one, all new neighbors after 20 years, even knew we had a special single street HOA. And for another 9 years, my mom did absolutely nothing as HOA president. My mom had to sell the home in 2019 very unwillingly, as it was the house my parents built together. But with the development of the city, property taxes had risen too high and priced her out. I took a week off work to fly out and help her pack, and while packing up the house, we found my dad's OG 1994 HOA binder, bylaws and all. And of course, Mom had to name an HOA successor. So this time, she did comply. The malicious part was more against everyone else. Very ceremoniously, not, my mom finally named Gladys the president of the HOA and gave her the binder, which apparently has long since been digitized and something Gladys has been reading for fun in preparation of this moment. Apparently, Gladys went rabid with the power as her kids had gone off to college and promptly charged everyone on the street $100 a month towards neighborhood incidentals, supposedly for mowing the strip that people just mowed themselves, and a highly encouraged neighborhood barbecue one Saturday a month to address the neighborhood concerns. She also outlawed basketball hoops in driveways, dictated no cars could be parked on the street or in driveways, but only in garages, things like landscaping and holiday decor approval, and other inane, absurd power trips. My mom kept her Nextdoor app open and watched Gladys go down in flames. 3 separate households moved and dropped long, hate-filled call-out posts about Gladys, making their lives a misery until they couldn't stand it anymore. That's 3 of 12 houses, by the way. Yeah, Gladys wrecked a single-street HOA with a quarter loss. Gladys got everything she wanted. My dad to name an HOA successor, my mom to name an HOA successor, for us to move away, and for her to finally be HOA president. And now everyone absolutely hates her, and no one will pay her $100 to go to her barbecues. And before my mom finally deleted the street from her next door, it seems that the rest of the street had voted to hold an election for a new HOA president. Her tenure lasted 6 months. Gladys doesn't understand why people talk so fondly about my parents as the most ideal HOA presidents, since they never did a thing. My mom is 2 years into her new home and does not miss the neighborhood anymore at all. Okay, so everyone is super mad at my mom for ruining many lives like Syndrome from The Incredibles. Let me explain how the handoff/nomination went. Holy crap, Secret Garden, the moving truck is coming in 1 hour and we still haven't cleaned out all the shelves in the study. What do we do? Just start throwing crap in boxes, Mom. And here's a trash bag for old cords and papers. Oh my word, your father's old HOA binder. Toss it. No, we can't. I think this is supposed to be kept by the city or something. Mom, we don't have time. We can mail it to the city or something. Hon, run it over to Gladys. Mom, are you sure? She's always been bugging me about it. She can keep it. Now run. I then literally tear downstairs, race across the street, ring the doorbell, shove the binder into Gladys's hands with a "my mom says this is yours now, bye," and then race back to find out that the Christmas decorations were still in a forgotten cabinet and need to be thrown into a trash bag. Literally zero premeditation and 100% aggravated meltdowns about moving. I cannot stress how much my mom did not want to move. I took out a lot of the emotional parts originally in the draft as not necessary or limiting the word count. My dad built her that house. The first night in the new house, she, as a 58-year-old woman, cried until 4 a.m. begging to go home. She loved our neighborhood, our street, and our house. She did not try to ruin her neighbors' lives. We didn't know anyone left on the street by that point anyway. They'd all been priced out or moved too, except for Gladys. The in line is kind of a throwaway, saying my mom is doing much better now and she doesn't miss Gladys at all. I do feel bad for all those folks driven out by Gladys's dumb rules, but I'm also going to say that the high property taxes probably didn't help. If I ever won the lottery, the first thing I would do would be buy our house back, put it in a trust, and let my mom live there for the rest of her life. Anyway, to the commenter saying my dad was a freaking legend, he absolutely was. Taking down Queen Karen, president of the HOA, posted by California Oldtimer. Okay, this happened years ago, 1985 to be exact. I was 45 when this happened and I'm 81 now. So after my second retirement, I started doing property management. I bought this 2,500 square foot luxury home in with the sole intention of renting it out. Now I didn't know how bad the HOA was, but when I became the owner, I soon found out. This all took place in 2 years' time. Karen would literally have a problem with everyone in the neighborhood. Trash cans left out? Fined. Loud music after 10 p.m.? Fined. Yard sale without permission? Fine. Removing dead plants and replanting without approval? You get fined. It went on and on like this. Now the community could run for the HOA board, but the HOA board chose the president. 6 out of the 10 members on the board liked Karen, so she always kept her job. Her husband was in the medical field, so he made a lot of money. It got to the point where she was called Queen Karen in the neighborhood and her dishing out HOA fines. Now I used to go in person to collect the rent because the people that rented my house were good friends of mine. I did this for months, so I would park my car by the front of the garage. I and my friends were having some music on, but it wasn't that loud. Queen Karen came over, driving her golf cart, and said, "Excuse me." "Yeah," I replied. "You have to turn that music down, it's too loud." I told her that it was 8 p.m. and that music that's even loud can be played until 10. She wasn't having it and demanded that I do so. Now my friends and I kept the music going and we were enjoying ourselves. She proceeded to get angry and fine me. Now, most people would just take the abuse and pay the fine, but not me. I went to the HOA board, I contested that fine, and I won. From that point on, Queen Karen made it her personal mission to destroy me. She would be and fuss about every little thing. I fought what I could, but I did end up paying for some of it. She also went after my tenants, which made things worse for me. So I had to sit down with my friends one night to discuss the problem. When I parked my car, Queen Karen came over in her robe and said I have to park somewhere else. I did because I didn't want to start anything. So we see her go back into her house and embrace a man that isn't her husband. We were being nosy and we came to the conclusion that she was cheating on her husband. Spoiler alert, she was. So my friends and I told Queen Karen's husband. I'm sure he did some investigation because 3 months later they divorced and he was moving his stuff out. Now gossip said that Queen Karen got nothing because she was the one that cheated and she didn't have a job, so she wasn't entitled to the money. From this point on, Queen Karen had a massive decline in the quality of life that she had. She sold her car and got a cheaper one, and she adopted different dressing habits. But even after the divorce, she never got a job and she was still living somewhat better than everyone else. Fast forward to 1986 in February. Queen Karen and the HOA had been giving out fines for very obscure things and increasing monthly dues. Having trash cans out a couple of hours early or after the trash man left would result in a fine. Targeting people that had older or dirty cars, and it just goes on and on. Me and the other people, the community, were sick of the crap that she and the HOA were pulling, so at the next meeting, we made our voices our concerns. Queen Karen said that the community had been falling behind on repairs and that the dues and increase in fines were necessary, especially if people weren't maintaining their own property. She said that it was in the yearly budget report and that we should have read it. The other ticked-off residents and I go and read the statement. Now, none of us read it because we take it as a junk mail and disregard it, but we read the whole statement, cover to cover. Queen Karen had increased the HOA budget 15%, and where that extra money was going remained unknown. So we went over to her house the next day and we demanded to know where the extra money was being spent, but she refused several times. We closed the door and went back to watching TV. We're filing a joint lawsuit to find out where the money was going, and in June, we found out. Cue the revenge. Queen Karen was living off HOA fines and dues. The increase is because she was running out of money. She still didn't have a job, so she embezzled from the HOA so she wouldn't have to get a job. She gets busted. We call the police for her embezzling the money, and she was charged with fraud and extortion. The neighbors and I filed a joint lawsuit against Karen to get reimbursement as well. Because she had no money, she had to mortgage her house to pay us all. She later went to federal prison for 6 years with no parole. Because she went away, no one was paying on our house. The bank foreclosed on it and it was bought by someone else. So when she got out in 1992, she was homeless. Honestly, the majority of us didn't want to ruin her life like this. Had she toned down the excessive fines, we would have let her be. But she had to double down and steal from us because she didn't want to get a job like everyone else. How I got a car dealership to give my friend a newer car, posted by Reddit admin Dumb87. Circa 2020 January, my friend makes a stupid decision and buys a brand new car he can't afford. His insurance is like $400 a month. He makes like $10.25 an hour working as a shift supervisor at McDonald's. His car payment is $795 a month. Now at $10.25 an hour, 30 hours a week, that's a weekly income of about $300 a week or around $1,230 a month. So yeah. So my friend came up to me for help because I used to sell cars and I know the industry pretty well. I go over his paperwork. The dealer did rip him off, but my friend is trying to find a way to get out of this mess. And ripping someone off, it isn't illegal. They did, of course, overcharge him for warranty. They gave him a higher APR, they had add-ons and so on, but none of that's illegal, and I know the only way I can get my friend out of this deal is if they did something illegal. So I look at his finance application that my friend signed. It correctly listed his income, which turned a light bulb on in my head. No bank is going to approve someone for a $795 car payment if they're only making $1,200 a month. It just doesn't make mathematical sense to do that. So I started searching through his paperwork for the finance app that the dealer submitted to the bank. You oftentimes, when you submit a finance application at a dealership, the dealership will take the hand-filled application out and then reproduce it electronically. This is pretty normal. However, on the application the dealer submitted to the bank, the dealer said my friend was a GM of the McDonald's and made $70,000. My friend had good credit, so it doesn't appear like the bank asked for a proof of income. So I go to the dealership with my friend and I tell the sales manager he's going to want to put me in touch with the GM because we're going to be unwinding my friend's deal and giving his trade-in back. The sales manager thought I was joking. The GM also thought I was joking. Then I demonstrated how his dealership finance department committed bank fraud. I showed the GM the finance app that my friend filled out, and then I showed the GM the finance app his dealership submitted to the bank and pointed at the income difference. My friend really made $14,000 a year, and the dealership claimed my friend made $70,000 a year. That's bank fraud. That's a felony. So let's keep this simple, shall we? The GM sees his dealership is in a load of crap. The proof I am presenting to him is rock solid. He knows it, I know it, and we're all on the same page. He goes, "Oh, okay, so what can we do to make this right?" I go, "Unwind the deal and get my friend his trade-in back." Unwinding the deal is basically the GM agreeing to cancel the deal and basically erasing the deal and pretending like it never happened. GM tries to avoid that, but I remain firm and remind him that we can easily take this documentation and turn his life into a living heck. He knows I'm right. My friend also needs a car to get to work the next day. The GM says he'll check into it, and he comes back and tells me that, well, unfortunately, they sold his trade-in already. I said, well, that's fine. Just unwind the deal and let's put my friend into something as good or slightly better than what he traded in for. So the GM goes, so he'll buy a car similar to his trade-in? I said, no, you'll give him a car similar to his trade-in. GM goes, it doesn't work that way. I go, well, it does when you commit bank fraud. GM is upset with me, and I remind him I'm being really nice, and this situation can totally get really ugly. Like felony level charges ugly. Like losing your franchise ugly. So yeah, this is gonna hurt, but it's gonna hurt less my way. So the GM goes, all right. And he looks in his inventory and he tells me that they have a 2007 Focus with 10,000 more miles. I tell him, no, the car you give my friend needs to be the same or better than what he traded in. The GM counters, well, I'm giving him a free car. And I go, no, you took his trade-in, you sold it, you made money on that sale, you also committed a felony in the process of selling him his new car. You are now correcting that mistake. This isn't a free car for my friend, this is you are correcting your mistake. GM insists that's what he's willing to do. I tell him that if he can't do better than that, we will go to a consumer protection attorney and have a conversation with them. My friend didn't want to go this route, but it was our plan B. So we get up. The GM says, wait, please give me a second. The GM goes, I have a 08 Civic. It has 5,000 more miles, but it's a Civic and not a Focus. I unwind the deal on the new car and put your friend in the Civic at no extra cost. We agree. The GM has the paper drawn up, the old loan on the new car is canceled, and they take in the new car again, but because it's already titled, they'll have to sell it as used, and well, that sucks for them. And they gave my friend a better car than the one he traded in. For people asking why we didn't get a lawyer involved from the start, well, we could have done that, but courts take a long time, and this was a faster way to fix the situation. It is a really bad idea to make a government employee angry, posted by Reaper0221. This one is a double government employee event, and what you should know is if you get the attention of a government employee and make them angry, they'll make your life a living heck. Sorry this is a long one. The setup is that I was working for a local county government in the permitting department that handled drainage and floodplain enforcement. I received a complaint from a homeowner, nice guy, who lived next door to a house that was part of an incorporated village, not nice guy. Nice guy lived in an unincorporated portion of the county, and hence the call to me as an agent of the county. I drove out to the site and to investigate and discovered some interesting facts. The permitting agent for the village allowed the incorporated homeowner to fill his lot, affecting the drainage, which caused the unincorporated lot to flood every time there was anything more than light rain. Nice Guy indicated that there was some tension between him and Not Nice Guy, and part of the issue was that Nice Guy and his partner were a gay couple. This ran up a red flag for me, but in trying to be impartial, I took the information and some photos for the file and indicated that I would contact the village to find a resolution. I wrote a letter and then called the village inspector, Jackwagon, to discuss. I was told by Jackwagon that the village could do as it pleased and that I could do nothing to stop Not Nice Guy from doing as they pleased, as it was approved by the village. There was then a comment about those type of people, the gay couple, making complaints just to cause trouble. I was now on the case, and it was time to make sure everything done on the incorporated lot was 100% legal. At this point, the game certainly was now on, because if there's one thing that grinds my gears, it's bullying. I went back out and spoke to Nice Guy to let them know what I was up to, and also that I was not going to let this slide. I then started investigating the elevations on the two lots and what fill had been placed on the incorporated lot. The Not Nice Guy came out and started getting belligerent about my presence and the ongoing investigation. He incorrectly stated that I did not have jurisdiction over his lot and that he would be calling the police. I patiently listened and then pulled out my two-way radio and requested that a home-based dispatch both a village and a county police unit to the location. I then indicated that since there was a regulatory floodplain on his lot, I did in fact have jurisdiction and that I would be exercising my right to determine the impact of his fill activities upon that floodplain. Both of the police units showed up and I let them know what was going on. They were both appropriately agitated to have to waste their time and let Not Nice Guy know that I was within my authority to proceed with the investigation. A little while later, while I was measuring things, Jackwagon showed up. He started berating me about harassing the village resident and threatening to call my boss and filing a complaint and so forth. I invited him to do so, quoting which parts of the code he should indicate that I was violating. I was using marking paint to show the limits of the floodplain for the photos for the file, and what do you know? Jackwagon's shoe got painted when he tried to stop me. Obviously, he was even more angry, as was the homeowner due to the very bright orange paint in the grass in his yard. I pointed out that I had done the same on the neighboring lots, but they just kept complaining. It was actually marking chalk that comes off pretty easily. Interestingly, I found two really wrong things on Not Nice Guy's lot. Number one, there was fill placed in the floodplain, and two, a garden shed was built on the fill and partially within the floodplain. Both are a big no-no and are actually against federal law. So, the course of action had two parts. 1. Make the incorporated homeowner remove the fill and the shed from the floodplain, and 2. Let Nice Guy place fill in their lot outside of the floodplain to counteract the fill remaining in Not Nice Guy's lot outside of the floodplain. I also told Nice Guy that it would be a good idea to run a field tile on their side to drain the water that would inevitably pond up between the two lots when it rained. Predictably, Not Nice Guy and Jackwagon got super angry when I sent the letter out that there were violations that either had to be corrected, which is remove the fill in the shed, or apply for a revision of the floodplain with the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with that. This then led to a meeting at the county office with Not Nice Guy, Jackwagon, my supervisor, and myself. Quickly, things went to 11, and there was yelling by Jackwagon about abuse of power and so on. The department head came to the conference room and told them both they were wrong and that they should leave peacefully and comply or face the consequences, which were fines. The best part was that Not Nice Guy had to apply for a permit, and guess who was the one to review and approve it? That's right, yours truly. Now, I was following the letter of the law, but you have to know that poor government workers are underpaid and overworked. Strangely, the permit for Nice Guy was almost immediately approved, while Not Nice Guy had to have a very thorough review to ensure it was correct. You can make a case that I was abusing my power, but I can assure you that the timing for their review was well within acceptable limits. Also, how could I be held to account that they misfiled 3 times before they finally got it right? Generally, if you behaved like a civil human and came to the office, we would help you get things done properly so the permit would go through first time. But Not Nice Guy decided he could do it all on his own, so it took him 3 tries. Had he come to the office, I would have given him the same service as others, but he decided to take the hard route, and therefore I didn't give a single inch when it came to the submission being perfectly correct. Ultimately, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot more effort than it should have. Moral of the story: don't be an entitled homophobic a-hole. HOA hired a contractor who put cement down our toilet, and the HOA is now distancing themselves from the problem and saying it's between us and the contractor. I own a home in a community with a homeowners association. Our area doesn't have city water and instead has a shared well. There are meters in homeowner basements, and we periodically report the numbers to the HOA, who charges us for water usage based on local rates. Recently, the HOA purchased new smart meters and hired a contractor to install them. So we had to let them into our homes to turn off the water, switch out the meter, turn the water back on. Meanwhile, they also gave this contractor a list of a few random repairs in the neighborhood to also handle. After the contractor left our home, we found a couple days later that our plumbing was not working correctly. A lot of money later, a plumber told us there is cement in our pipes and septic system. This seemed very related to the fact that the HOA had them fix a small section of the curb in front of our house. We went down the block to the contractor and asked them what the heck they did, and they just said it was just disposing of the extra cement and not to worry because it gets filtered out at the treatment plant. Except we aren't on city water and sewer where our waste goes to a treatment plant. We're on septic, and that cement has now clogged our pipes, and the plumber believes it has damaged our septic system. The contractor came over and poked around for several hours. The 3 of them had a loud argument, and then they left. They've apparently stopped showing up to the appointments in the neighborhood for meter replacements. So, the prevailing theory is that they realized they messed up and ran away. Meanwhile, now the plumbing company worked on it for 2 days, hoping they could get resolved on it without doing anything crazy, but they haven't made much progress. They're now at the point where they say they will need to cut out and replace affected areas of pipe, which could be a little or it could be a lot. They are bringing in a septic company to consult on the septic system side of things. We have been in constant contact with the HOA since they are the ones that contracted with this company. They're trying to wash their hands of it, saying that we'll have to directly sue the contractor. Meanwhile, the contractor seems to be something of a fly-by-night operation. From what I'm hearing, they were the lowest bid the HOA got for this work, They are from out of town, and the HOA doesn't have any real information other than the very common names of two guys and a phone number that's now going to voicemail. The HOA did not get any proof of insurance or anything else like that, and we cannot find any real information about their business. So the meat of my question, it feels like trying to go after this contractor is barking up a dead tree. The HOA, in my opinion, seems equally responsible because they hired an unvetted contractor. But I'm not sure if my opinion concurs with the legal opinion. We haven't talked to a lawyer just yet. We're not sure if the cost to fix this will come in above or below small claims threshold. Do you agree with this? You need to talk to a licensed attorney who specializes in construction issues. You'll likely need to go after both the HOA and the contractor. Without knowing more specifics of the arrangement between you and the HOA and how the contractor was hired, the contractor worked for the HOA. The contractor damaged your property, so you clearly have a claim against them. The reason you need to likely go after the HOA is that they should be carrying insurance to cover common area issues. This is one of those sorts. Yes, you are a member of the HOA, but the HOA is itself an actor. They also have the relationship with the contractor. They did the hiring and should have done due diligence in hiring them. It appears they did not. At the end of the day, this is a more complex matter and really isn't something this place is best for. You really have a lot of extra information, but a good attorney will break through this and get to the heart of the matter. The person you need to speak to needs to be well versed in disputes with contractors and real estate matters. They should also understand how HOAs work. You don't want to pay for someone to learn on the job, and this is the kind of thing that any attorney will take, but will cost you more with someone who isn't their specialty, because they'll need to catch up on your dime. What would you do if you get somebody that knows what they're doing? They might have dealt with something like this before, but I don't know, this is a crazy situation. Cement in the septic? Jeez, what would you do? Don't bother you at all tonight? Alright, posted by Mr. Gaff. So this is a fun little story from my last job working in a vegetarian and vegan food factory. It was the worst job you can imagine. The place smelled like rotting food at all times. The employees rarely ever do anything to prevent spreading illnesses. They would regularly show up sick even during the pandemic, and management was just the worst. I quickly adopted the policy of doing the least irritating job that I could find and trying to avoid listening to my shift lead since he was a jerk. For the sake of the story, let's call the shift lead Jim. Jim was a by-the-numbers guy, to the point that if you argued with him using logic, he would instead tell you that you're wrong, and his math, yes, he would point out that phrasing very deliberately, was what they were going to use, and to not think above your pay rate. So on this particular night, I worked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., Jim decided he wanted to be really lazy since the building owner was going to be gone for the week and he wouldn't have to report anything to him for days. He spent his whole night just sitting in the office playing games on his phone, ignoring our calls because we needed assistance. After about 8 or 9 p.m. rolled around and me finally getting ticked off enough to care, I asked my department manager if he could cover for me for just a couple minutes to get Jim in there to help. We needed him to go get maintenance because the machine sealing a product called tempeh was barely sealing any at all, and we were throwing away about 70-80% of all packages. I get into his office, and before I can say a single word, Jim says very loudly, "Whatever it is, I don't care. Just leave me alone tonight." I tried to get in a word, but he just glared at me and said, "Just get the heck out and don't bother me again." Then an evil thought crossed my mind. Cue the malicious compliance. "You just want me to not bother you, Jim? Or does that mean everyone?" I asked, and he says the words that screwed him over. "As long as I'm not bothered, I don't care." "All right," I say, and I leave with the grin that most anime villains dream of doing. I get to my department manager and I tell him that Jim doesn't want to be bothered at all tonight. My manager looks at me kinda confused at first and asks what the heck does that mean, to which I just told him Jim doesn't care what happens as long as no one bothers him. Me putting a big emphasis on the last part. Now, my department manager was the guy you go to for getting information around the build fast. He's a fast talker and quick on his feet. He lets me get back into my spot and very quickly starts darting around to each department to inform them of what transpired. Needless to say, Jim wasn't bothered at all the entire night. He even had to be waking up at 3 a.m. to do his nightly paperwork because he fell asleep. During the night, the machines packaging the soy hot dogs also started sealing poorly, but we couldn't get any maintenance out until it's been approved by Jim, so we just ran it all night. By the end of the night, my line, I worked in the boxing department boxing up the tempeh, had thrown away roughly 4 tons of tempeh. We used large red buggies that would hold at least 500 pounds, and we chucked 17 of those suckers. I won't even try to count up the dogs that were thrown out too. Needless to say, this was going to hit the company hard. The fallout. Next day, my shift comes in, and to no one's surprise, Jim is on my butt right away. Why didn't you inform me that we were losing so much product? He starts screaming into my face. The owner looked at his email and saw that we lost nearly $15,000 in product alone last night. I simply smiled at Jim, and I said to him, well, I would have said something, but you told me not to bother you all night. Jim, realizing he could be in trouble for this, doubles down on trying to blame me. You had a duty to tell me even if it's against my orders, he shouts. I calmly put my helmet on and collared coat, smile, and say, sorry, I didn't think because it was above my pay grade. And then I went out onto the floor quite happy that I knew he was either going to be in a crap ton of trouble or fired. Sadly, he wasn't fired, only in trouble. His position was nearly up for grabs, and he had to work every day for 6 months after that, with only Sundays off, before they eased up on him. Did he learn from this? No, he was still a total jerk that the whole staff generally acted nice to, but hated with a passion. Not gonna give me a meal benefit? I'll eat at the office then. Posted by K. Grant. Some backstory from a few years back. I was working on healthcare as a HTA nurse, which around here is a nurse which travels around the city area doing health assessments which don't require a 112 call or 911, which is reserved for emergency and paramedics who handle those cases. My job was essentially picking up the jobs, which do not require immediate response, and try to treat the patient either at home or, if not possible, give instruction where they can get treatment for whatever was the ailment at that time. It was a job to assist people so they wouldn't come to the ER with small injuries or illnesses which can be handled in the regular healthcare center next working day. Also, the other part was to go around and treat patients which had had, for example, IV treatments regularly and administer the fluid treatment, the drugs, painkillers, ABs, and so on. My issue was that I noticed that as we drove around the large area from one patient to another, we had to stop for a lunch at some point and that we had to pay lunch from our own pocket, whatever it cost. This is common practice for example paramedics. They eat when they can, and usually at some gas station or so, somewhere where they currently are and have time to eat. I usually read the contracts pretty carefully, which comes from my previous career as an engineer, where I had to make foolproof contracts and avoid stepping on traps. And our healthcare union had negotiated that if your work requires X amount of traveling, you should be entitled for tax-free meal benefit. I wasn't completely sure about it, if that particular statement would apply for the job that I was doing, but I decided to ask stupid questions about it, and eventually forced my supervisor to contact the management to get a statement for the issue at hand. From the management, it went to the legal department, and they begun to delve into it, and it lasted for weeks, since they couldn't quite deny it outright, but they eventually came to a conclusion that it couldn't be applied to the job which I had. I was a little annoyed at this, but I decided to not contest it any more than that. But another statement which union had negotiated for us was that if we have an office or a station and a social space where to warm up your meal, so like a microwave, coffee maker, and so on, we are entitled to have a lunch break of 30 minutes per day at the regular office where I leave every morning. Just a normal thing, which, if backed by the law as well around here, lunch is holier than holy if one can say so. I mentioned earlier that our area was rather large, so if I was working on northern parts, for example, it could take some 2 hours driving there, spend 4 hours with patients around that area, and then drive back to the station in an 8-hour shift. So I agreed with the bosses that I drop the issue with the meal benefit and I'll eat at the office instead. And they agreed on this, and I got it in written email that I could do that. So, not every day, but a few times a week when I was assigned to some faraway area, I jumped into the car, drove there, did maybe one patient call, then I had to hurry up back so I can begin my lunch break, then eat for 30 minutes, and drive back to do another patient and drive back. That's an awful lot of driving and wasted time. Eventually, I was confronted about this, and I explained that because I can't afford to eat lunch every day, I just have to eat my own cooking at the office, and that as we don't have the meal benefit, I'm practically forced to drive back and forth so that I can have my prescribed by law lunch break. They were dumbfounded at first, but they could not squirm out of it at all. Problem was that the common practice had been for God knows how long that paramedics and such just went along and paid their own meals, as they never knew better. They had always had the possibility to go back to the station to eat, and I'm quite sure that we all were entitled for that meal benefit, since it is prescribed by law and union agreements in a way that if you can't eat in a regular way at the office, you're entitled for the meal benefit instead. But no one had really contested it earlier. So they were dumbfounded and asked me not to do it in the future, but I responded to that are they going to get the meal benefit running for the department or not? Because if they are not going to do it, I am entitled to eat at the station. The discussion went on a while longer on the subject, but eventually they caved in. They arranged the meal benefit for every nurse and paramedic on the department, as they couldn't find a way out otherwise and couldn't have us driving back and forth and not performing our job. Have me work throughout the pandemic, promote me, and then don't accommodate my disability? You can pay my short-term disability insurance for that. Posted by Random Cashier 75. Let me do a little backstory first. I started working at Walmart before the COVID-19 pandemic happened as a full-time apparel employee. I happened to have grand mal epilepsy that started in my mid-20s, around 2015. I'm also quite understanding of other people's disabilities and often try to work with them since I can relate to having issues. So for example, I use hand gestures and/or writing for deaf coworkers. This helps with basic communication that most hearing people don't bother with, and it's normally appreciated that I do this. I got to stay in that exact same position throughout 2020 and part of 2021. Naturally, I had to still go to work as an essential employee, deal with the anti-masking idiots, and worry about both of my parents who also work in retail. I managed to get myself promoted to the digital shopping department by transferring stores and pointing out certain key skills that I have that are, well, really useful for retail in 2021. I had politely asked for the minimal requirements for my department manager of 1. Being able to take medication at work, and 2. Not having to bring orders out to cars because I lack what's known as an aura. Basically, summed up here, I can't sense seizures coming. Though I don't have them very often due to medication, a grand mal plus a busy parking lot at work seems like a bad idea. My department manager agreed to this condition as long as I did other work to help out the digital team instead, which was completely reasonable to ask for in my opinion. So as per the request, for a lot of the closing shifts that I'd work, I'd take up phone duty, pre-set up the orders to go out, and/or do returns for the department. The issue here was the personal department person. She kept forgetting about my condition repeatedly over the next year. Now this was despite me bringing in medical notes from my neurologist for my file, pointing this out more than once on why I shouldn't be scheduled solo, and having the department manager talk to her. Now after over a year, she scheduled me completely solo for a closing, which I noticed and texted my department lead about. I did the official suggestion of hers, despite my thoughts that corporate Walmart was likely even dumber than her on basic disabilities. I only asked for the exact same things that I asked my department manager for, both very, very logical and minimal accommodation requests. As I suspected, Walmart's Sedgwick said, "We can't do this unless you change departments." All departments suggested either wouldn't work due to time and/or location, or they were back at the same level as apparel, which would lower my position and pay. Sedgwick put me on an automatically placed LOA, leave of absence, after a few days without my permission. This was, quote, to allow me to figure out what I should do, end quote, over the next 4 months. I called up and I asked the Walmart Benefit Center about this. As of late 2019, Walmart signed all of their employees up for a free to the employees short-term disability insurance without officially telling them. I filed to get this insurance to pay for my entire LOA, politely explained my situation to a total of 3 people, and was given a short-term disability payments, with back pay, for exactly when they put me on leave. I'd rather have my paycheck and insurance stick around for a while, despite Walmart and Sedgwick being idiotic. I quit Walmart after having gotten holiday employment with Target for 2 months at that point. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency, posted by I Like the Quiet Zeppo. This morning, I got into my car and I realized that I left my headlights on. Thankfully, modern technology meant that it had automatically switched off when the key was removed, but it reminded me of a time where that wasn't so. Many years ago, I was working one of my first jobs in a little cafe, nearing the end of my training period. It was a quiet day, perfect to put the newbie on with only one experienced staff member. The experienced staff member called in sick. Boss had to come in and cover until Sue could come in early. Boss wanted to use the time on site to do paperwork out the back. I'll be in here if you have any questions. I very annoyingly had a lot of questions. How to void an incorrect transaction, where to find more special paper for the credit card machine, what to do when the coffee grinder stopped working, and so on. Finally, boss said, I'm busy. Don't bother me unless it's an emergency. Let me know when Sue is here. Shyly, I replied, that's just what I came to tell you. Sue just arrived. Great. Any more questions? Just ask her. Sue took over the coffee area and got me on restocking, clearing tables, and emptying the bins and other necessary grunt work. I went out to the outside bins through the little staff parking area and saw my boss's old car there with the headlights still on. I went back to my boss's office. Boss, is it an emergency? Boss snapped. Not to me, I replied. Then go away. I left quickly. I went to tell Sue instead. Sue, and then I changed my mind. Boss doesn't want to be disturbed unless it's an emergency, so I'm supposed to ask you if I have more questions. Sue and I worked pleasantly until the end of my shift a few hours later. As I gathered my things to leave, Boss ran by me, knocking into me a bit. Without turning around to see if I was okay, Boss said, "Sorry, I'm in a rush." I slowed down to see what happened next, getting out my brick of a phone to text my mother that I was on my way home. I could hear my boss swearing. OP! Oh no. Boss realized that what I was going to tell them earlier, and I was in trouble. Can you bring your car in and give me a jump start? My battery is flat. Now only a few cars could fit, so only senior staff and management could park there. I walked here. I live 10 minutes of a walk up the hill. I raced off before Boss could blame me. The next time I was on shift with Sue, I asked what happened to Boss. Well, headlights got left on. He got a flat battery. Boss tried to jump start it with my car, but it didn't work. Had to call a taxi. Funny that neither of us noticed the lights were on when we walked by it. And I realized, of course, she had to have seen it when she walked in. I can only imagine why she didn't say anything either. This story is completely wild and I had a lot of fun with the voices for it, so I hope you enjoy. Do your job. Okay, Karen, posted by Not the Golden Child 616. So I work in online fulfillment at a large home, garden, and building supply store. Mysterious. My job title comes into play later, as technically we aren't supposed to work with customers directly, just point them in the right direction or find another associate who works in that department. I had a massive order to grab, several heavy and large pieces of sheet metal and screws. Problem is, the sheet metal size I need isn't where it's meant to be, so I'm having to scan pretty much, well, everything to figure out what's what. Bigger problem? This lingering in the wild sadly put me at a range of a Wild Karen attack. Wild Karen in a raging harpy voice says, "Are you going to help me or not?" I'm suddenly very confused looking at her, especially as she hasn't spoken to me at all. She says, increasingly annoyed, "Well, I've been standing over there forever and you haven't offered to help me." I say, my bad, I can try? I don't work in this department, so it depends if..." Suddenly actively hostile Karen says, "Try? Ugh, no, you will. It doesn't matter if you work in this department or not." I'm taking calming breaths so I don't lash back, wondering what this woman's problem is. Okay, what do you need? Definitely unable to control annoyance in my tone as this woman is yelling at me. This! I'm not joking when I say she proceeds to suddenly pull out a screw and nearly stab me in the eye, shoving it towards me. I push her hand away, feeling much less calm as I have PTSD reactions to people putting hands in my face, much less of a freaking screw. Now I'm visibly shaking. Okay, ma'am, screws are at the end of the aisle, on the left. What? I already know that. I'm angrily replying, oh, okay, what size is that? What size do you need? Even angrier, Karen replies, you tell me. She takes a step closer as if she's trying to seem threatening. I'm unable to hold back and say, I have no clue, ma'am. There is an entire wall of screws. It's impossible for me to tell the size just by looking at it. You will not come at me like that. She says me like she's some royal and I should feel afraid. Your manager would not like that. I no longer give two craps and I say, you think? Well, I could get a manager if you'd like. Maybe one of them can identify the screw by sight. Don't make me mad today. Just do your job. Cue what could count as malicious compliance. I realized that I'd already told her exactly where that product is that she needed and where it would be located. Yes, ma'am. I walked away from her to my trolley and proceeded to continue looking for the items on my order. What are you doing? I'm doing my job. What was funny was, an aisle over, one of our assistant managers actually was nearby, with Karen ranting and stomping like a toddler. I walked over when I noticed him and told him that I had two issues. One, can't find the item, and two, I got a Karen that he may want to talk to. He laughed and showed me where the correct size sheet metal improperly was and totally ignored her, same as I was, until she huffed loudly and stormed away. I don't think she liked that my manager did like how I handled the situation. A few years ago when I was doing my undergrad, I was in a 300 level marketing class. In the beginning of this class, we were assigned groups that we were supposed to work together throughout the semester. We were to put together a marketing proposal for a local professional sports team and pitch it to them as part of our final grade. Every topic we were learning in class was to be directly applied to our marketing strategy, and the whole semester our professor would basically walk us through from beginning to end on how to put it together. So early on, we divvied up roles for each person. One person does market analysis, another person does the most applicable marketing strategies, another person does budgeting, and so on. There were about 7 people in our group, so plenty of help to be had for the different parts of the project. Or there should have been, at least. We would meet up weekly, and early on, a lot of it was just kind of roundtable discussion about what direction we wanted to take it. But as the semester went on, we started to notice some people were falling behind a bit. Each person falling behind apologized and assured us that they would get all they needed to be done when it was due. They were just swamped with other projects and classes and bullcrap. Come the final week, when we were to put all of our separate parts together and make it all mesh, guess what? They hadn't done jack crap all semester. They might have had a couple of bullet points on their subject, but it was far from a completed project and basically something any middle schooler could have lined out. 1, they are a professional sports team, and 2, there are no other professional sports teams of this sport in the state. 3, they have a large stadium, and so on. I was ticked. I and a few others in the group had spent a lot of time doing the research and putting it all together in a presentable form that was sure to impress not only my professor, but the marketing team of the affiliated sports group. The other reliable members of my group and I spent a lot of late nights working together to cover for the other teammates' lazy butts. But alas, it was too little too late, and we were not going to be able to submit something presentable by the deadline, and I sure as heck didn't want a bad grade for the amount of work that I put in, for not only my portion, but for the portions of those who didn't do anything. I met with my professor during her office hours and asked for a deadline extension, to which she replied, "Absolutely not. I made you aware of this project on day 1 of the semester, so you have quite literally had all semester to work on this. Why would you fall short of the deadline and need an extension?" I explained the situation to the professor, who graciously understood what I had gone through. She asked me to provide a list of all the members of my team, exactly what and how much to the project they had contributed, and gave us an additional 24 hours to submit what we could. She said that she would take what I had told her into consideration. Come the day of the presentation, our professor was walking around with the marketing professionals that we were to present to, and I think she was listening closely to each person's part of the presentation to verify what I had told her. Some of us knocked it out of the park on our portions, others very quickly glanced over the topics. It was evident who was a contributor and who was a leech. About a week later, once final grades were posted, our team group chat was flooded with "WTF, I thought we had a great marketing proposal, but that witch gave me an F for it" type messages from a few of the members. I got an A in the class. I won it for this price, posted by Blue Ellen. These past days have been bad for me, so enjoy these 2 stories told to me by my coworkers about Karens who they think they're in charge of the store. Story 1. My coworker, Maddie, was busy doing the self-checkout when a lady rings up an $84 ice maker. Immediately, the Karen calls Maddie over. She says, "So they said that since I got this from the top shelf, I can have it for half off." Maddie says, "Who said this?" Karen vaguely points to the man cash registers. They did." Maddie says, let me check the price." And of course, it rings up for full price. "Ma'am, this is coming up full price. They said I could have it half off." Maddie then goes to a cashier at the register and asks about it. Other coworkers said, "Oh yeah, I got it down for her, but I never said anything about half off. She can pay full price or not at all." Maddie informed the Karen who, of course, was ticked off and refused to buy it. Story 2. Now, there's retail price, what customers pay, and unit price, which is just for the store. Honestly, I never noticed it, and it plays absolutely no part in a customer's transaction. Now, usually the unit price is several cents, but like I said, it has no bearing in a customer's transaction. But this lady saw the unit price and thought she found such an amazing loophole. Karen brings up an item that rings up for $26. She said, "I know it says $26, but the unit price is 86 cents, and I want it for that price." Cashier says, "No, you can't have it for the unit price. I mean, you can have it for the price that rings up." "No, it's on the price tag. It says 86 cents. You have to honor it." The unit price is for the store. It's not for customers. The price is $26, and that's also on the tag. Karen then just devolves into a fit, causing the manager to come. He actually was so fed up with Karen that he pulled out his phone, looked up the definition of unit price, and read it out to her. She realized she was beaten after that and stormed off, not buying anything. Also had a lady who stood around for over 15 minutes to complain to a manager because there wasn't enough cashiers and she had to wait in line. This Karen in the story is deranged. You'll see what I mean. How does she try to even pull this off? It's called "I Wanted This House" by Cats Are Nice Death. Almost 30 years ago, my dad retired from the Army. That's important to the story, and we all moved from the barracks to an entirely different county. Not overly fun for me or my sister because she just joined secondary school and didn't want to leave her friends behind, and I just didn't want to move again. If you're not familiar with the British Army, soldiers used to get posted places, invariably places like Germany, Switzerland, Cyprus, etc. It was 50-50 of if the whole family was posted with them, depending on how long they were away for. By the time I was 8, we'd already moved at least 4 times that I can remember. Anyway, the MOD, Ministry of Defense, used to have old soldiers' quarters in places, and when the barracks in the areas no longer needed them, retired soldiers and families would get first dibs on the houses. Mom and Dad found this house, and we set about packing up again and moving again. But this time for good. Yeah. About 6 months after we'd moved, we'd almost made it out on our own and had some family friends over for dinner. We're all in the dining room, an actual room separate from the kitchen and living room. I was amazed, I'd never seen one. And we were sitting down to eat, and I mean all of us. Grandparents had 2 cars, 3 sets of friends were 3 cars, we were 1 car, so it was very obvious from the outside that the house is not empty and a lot of people are there. Dad looks up from eating and his jaw drops. There is a woman just wandering around the garden. She's sniffing the flowers, looking in the windows, and generally behaving as if the house was a horse for sale, checking its metaphorical teeth. It wasn't even as if she could have just walked down the side of the house into the back garden. She would have had to unlock and open 3 gates. So Dad goes out with a couple of his friends, which were all ex-army and rugby types. They're big guys, hard to miss. And this woman glances at them, this Karen, and then continues poking about the garden and trying to get into the shed. Dad shouts, "What do you think you're doing?" She says, "Well, I'm looking at the garden," bold as brass. The friends say, "Yeah, we see that. Why?" "Look, what are you doing here? This is my house. Get off of my property. Who do you think you are?" She just shrugs and says, "My son was going to buy this house. I want this house. I wanted to see what I could do with the garden when he buys it." Dad stares. "What the heck do you mean? When he buys it? It's not for sale. I live here." "No, you don't. My son wanted to buy this house." "Mate, we're going to check on the families and call the police. You okay with her?" "Yeah, just make sure the kids stay inside." And to the woman he says, "Get the heck off of my property." "It's not yours. It's mine. I live here," she replies. By this point, we've opened the window to get a proper listen, and Mom has lost her crap. It's a proper mama bear reaction. Her 2 babies are inside, along with 6 other kids that she's known their whole lives. She flies out the door. She shouts, "Get the heck off of my property. Get away from my husband and get away from here." "Calm down, love. It's okay. Go inside. I'll get rid of her." The woman with 0 sense of self-preservation says, "Who do you think you are? This is my house. Get away from me, you crazy fat bee." Dad has to grab Mom on the way past before she ends this woman. I don't want some sort of unhinged woman in my house. Get off of my property." Thankfully, the police arrive and escort the woman off the property, telling Dad to invest in locks for the gates. Dad's turn to lose his crap. He explains, loudly, at length to police that this woman had to unlock a few gates and shows him how the woman got in. As they're getting her to the car, she declared that she'll get us out of her house. It's her son's house. She lives here and she'll get us out. Dad tells the police that he's pressing charges, and the woman's tone changes. Suddenly, it's not her son's house at all. She didn't mean any of it. She's very sorry. She can't be charged. I don't know what came of it in the end. Mom and Dad wouldn't tell us, but I still remember trying to work out if she was crazy or what. But either way, we still live in the house, and we all still love it. It's got a dining room. My boss stole my Super Bowl tickets, so I made him lose a major client, posted by Branson on. I'm a huge 49ers fan. I mean, the rabid all-day tailgate in the parking lot type. A few years ago, we made it back to the Super Bowl. I was working at a consulting firm with a handful of accounts that I would interact with directly. One client in particular knew how big of a Niners fan I was. I was the day-to-day lead on his account. He really liked working with me, and we became friends, often grabbing drinks or dinner after our meetings. He had access to a pair of extra company seats to the game, and as a thank you, wanted to give them to me as a gift. He passed the tickets over to the partner on that account, who I will refer to as Jerkhead Partner, to be given to me as a surprise. The game came and went. We lost, it sucked. The next time we met, we went to drinks afterward, and he mentioned, "Hey, by the way, why didn't you go to the game? I heard someone else was in your seats." I asked, "What game?" He said, "The Super Bowl." Confused, I answered, "I didn't have seats to the Super Bowl." He told me that he gave Jerkhead Partner a pair of his company tickets for me as a gift so I could attend. I had 0 idea what he was talking about. He looked shocked, told me to quietly ask around about it and get back to him. When I was back in the office the next week, I found out through one of the secretaries that Jerkhead Partner had given a pair of Super Bowl tickets to another one of his clients as a gift from our company. I might have let this sort of thing go to keep the peace under different circumstances, but these were seats on the 30-yard line to see the freaking 49ers play in the Super Bowl. I was ticked. I considered confronting Jerkhead Partner myself, but I realized that it was a client who had noticed that I wasn't there in the first place, so if I let him handle it, there would be no blowback on me. So I texted him, "Oh hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for thinking of me with those seats. It appears that they were given to another one of our firm's clients." He texted back right away in all caps, "Are you kidding me?" And then, "Pretend I never told you, let me handle it." He followed up with me about formulating a plan. A few days later, we were asked to come down for a meeting in their office. The client requested the partner be present, not entirely unusual, so Jerkhead Partner and I hopped a flight the next week and headed over to their office. Little did Jerkhead partner know, my client had orchestrated a wonderfully awkward little show to catch him red-handed. When we entered the conference room, it was all the usual suspects, along with a woman in her 30s we didn't recognize. My client immediately introduces, Jerkhead partner, this is Stephanie such and such, VP from this other department. She wanted to sit in on this meeting. Hey, OP, you guys must already know her from the Super Bowl. She then responds as she goes to shake my hand. Oh, I don't think so. Did we meet there? I'm sorry if I forgot. Client responds, geez, Steph, how much did you have to drink? They were sitting right next to you. Client looks at me and says, sorry, client, I wasn't there. Are you thinking of someone else? At this point, Jerkhead partner is looking visibly uncomfortable, probably trying to come up with an excuse. He starts in with an, when Stephanie says over him, no, so-and-so from other company were in the other seats. By the way, I was wondering why we gave company seats to those guys. Is there a project that we're working on with them that I don't know about? Obviously not. They were in completely different industries. It would be like Coca-Cola partnering with John Deere. Jerkhead partner lets out an, oh, again, and the client immediately speaks over him, asking, Jerkhead partner, I gave you those seats for OP? At this point, Jerkhead partner is turning bright red. He responds, well, he wasn't able to make it, so he must have given the seats away to someone else, and turns to me, looking for me to cover for him. Client smirks at me. I respond, what are you talking about? Client, you gave me tickets to the Super Bowl? Client suddenly raises his voice. Jerkhead partner, those tickets were a personal thank you gift from me to OP. Did you give them away to someone else? Was it another client? Jerkhead partner butts in with, maybe they, I don't know, got mixed up somewhere in the office? Client went quiet for what probably seemed like an eternity to Jerkhead partner. He then looked down, grabbed his portfolio and iPad, put them into his briefcase, and said, I think this meeting is over. OP, it seems as if I owe you a thank you gift. Let's go to lunch. Stephanie, you're welcome to join. Jerkhead partner, I need to evaluate our relationship. Please go back home and expect to hear from us next week. Jerkhead partner suggests he would like to join, presumably to do damage control, and Stephanie sternly tells him, I don't think that's a good idea, and asks the front desk to see Jerkhead partner out. As soon as he is in the elevator, we all break out laughing hysterically. Stephanie wasn't really a VP, just an employee at the company who client had drafted into helping with his pre-planned meeting skit, but she did end up coming to lunch with us and was a fellow Niners fan and a total blast to hang out with. On our way to the restaurant, I got a desperate text from Jerkhead partners saying that I needed to cover for the firm and that we could discuss things when I got back. I replied, yeah, we need to talk, but I'll see what I can do. Client told me to wait a couple hours and then respond to him. 1. To expect invoices for the resale value of the Super Bowl tickets, and resale is way above face value. It was over $10,000, as well as our lunch. He picked a pricey spot and made a big show of overspending, and that he expected them to be paid immediately. 2. Expected I be given a direct apology. 3. Expected a written apology to his company for what he considered theft. And 4. He will only interact with me or another one of our firm's partners, never Jerkhead partner. This whole thing caused a stir with the other partners and actually came off looking great because it appeared that I had made a good faith effort to save the client for the firm despite being the victim in this situation. The client would transfer to another partner, which meant Jerkhead partner lost his profit share on any work with them. Oh, and the other partners in the firm made Jerkhead partner pay the invoices back out of his salary. In retrospect, I really have no idea what the heck this guy was thinking. Did he seriously believe the client would just not notice me not thanking him for Super Bowl tickets? Anyway, the well was kind of poisoned for me there long term because Jerkhead partner wasn't going anywhere. I left the firm a few months later for a much better position. Client ultimately terminated their relationship with that firm a year later, and he actually now works with a good friend of mine at a competing firm. I'm still ticked that I missed out on the Super Bowl, even though we lost, hoping that we make it back this year so I can finally go to one in person. Go Niners! Young firefighter disrespects a lieutenant, so I shame him and get him to quit. Posted by Eric Smith 98105. I'm not sure if this is pro or not, but I got revenge on a D-bag I used to volunteer firefight with. This was in the early to mid 2000s. I decided to go to the local fire department as a volunteer firefighter. I did it for about 5 years, and it was great. Training consisted of 3 months of fire training, 2 nights a week and all day Saturday, and then you would go to EMT training, which is another 3 months of training. I was about a year and was asked to help train some new recruits. One of the lieutenants, Amy, was a short, middle-aged woman who was so full of fire that she could make a grown man cry. One of those people who commands both fear and respect wherever she went. Honestly, a great lieutenant and a great person. When she wasn't being a drill sergeant, she was extremely kind and generous. She would often bake people cakes and treats and deliver them to the various stations in our department. However, in this new academy class that I was asked to help with, there was a cocky kid that we'll call Aaron. Aaron talked big during the training and acted like he was the all-American hero, like he was going to be the lead bad A in Backdraft 2. He performed moderately well in training, but far from the top of the class. He gets assigned to Amy's station, which is a pretty quiet station in the department. A few months after he starts, Amy swings by my station one night to say hi. She brings us the Motherload cake from Claim Jumper, which is a massive 6-layer cake. She explained that she had treated her crew to a night out at Claim Jumper, which must have cost a lot of money. I think she took out about 8 people and bought a whole cake to top it all off. They had eaten the first 2 layers, so she gave us the remaining 4. We thanked her profusely when she left. Back then, the big social media platform was MySpace, and I decided to look up some of the people in the department to make friends. I came across Aaron's page, and I noticed some photos of him and the rest of the crew at Claim Jumper with Amy. However, when I read the comments, he bragged about how he had purposefully ordered the most expensive dinner, appetizers, and drinks since Amy was buying. He bragged about how he was going to take advantage of her, quote, stupidity. This alone ticked me off because she was doing this super nice and generous. What an ungrateful, selfish jerk. Then I read the rest of his profile. He had videos and memes on his page glorifying himself as a bad A firefighter, bragging about running into burning buildings and how he was such a hero. He was flirting with girls, blatantly trying to impress them with how brave he is. Bear in mind, he just graduated from the academy 3 months prior and hadn't even gone to EMT school. He had never been to a house fire, and all he basically did was carry gear for the other fully qualified firefighters. It was too much for me to tolerate. So, here is the revenge. I printed off copies of his MySpace page, including his comments about Amy and toxic bragging. I made multiple copies and took them to every station in the department. We all had pagers, I'm old, and a small keyboard at each station to send out text messages. I made an anonymous, all-staff page to everyone in the department. I had to keep it brief since I couldn't fit a ton of characters, but I sent out his MySpace info and told everyone about how he treated Amy. Within an hour, Aaron had cleared out his MySpace page of all posts, photos, and so on. A couple of days later, he deleted his account. It's a good thing I made so many copies. Immediately after this happened, he stopped coming to volunteer, and a few weeks later, I heard that he had quit. I later talked to Amy and admitted that I was the one who sent the page. I told her I hated how he treated her, and she thanked me. She seemed really sad and hurt by what he had done, but being the tough short lady that she was, she quickly got back into being an actual bad A firefighter. She later started dating and married a fire chief that also helped at the academy. I've lost touch with her, but I hope she did well. She seemed pretty happy when I last saw her. And by the way, I can't stop laughing about how this story ignited a firestorm about Claim Jumper's Motherload cake.